following episode of our podcast covers a sensitive topic of suicide. We understand that suicide is a deeply distressing and serious matter that can profoundly impact individuals and communities. It is important to note that the views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of our podcast or our company. While we strive to provide valuable and informative content, we recognise that discussing topics related to mental health, including suicide, can be triggering or uncomfortable for some listeners. We strongly advise discretion and self-care when you're engaging with this episode. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, we urge you to seek professional help or contact a helpline in your country. This episode is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any concerns about your mental health or someone else's mental health, we encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare professional. We understand the importance of providing our listeners with a safe and supportive environment. Suppose you feel distressed or overwhelmed during or after listening to this episode. In that case, we encourage you to take the necessary steps to prioritise your well-being, such as speaking with a mental health professional or confiding in a trusted person in your life. Remember, you are not alone, and there are people who care and want to help.
Welcome to Pharmacy View podcast, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key people within Australian pharmacy and the associated global industry. In this stream of podcast episodes, we discuss with our guests the full scope of leadership tools that go into building the pharmacy leaders toolbox for team and career success. I am your host, Chantelle Turner, pharmacist, leadership coach, and founder of Turn Pharmacy Leadership. My guest today is proudly brought to you by Shopfront Solutions for all your shelf and digital marketing needs, part of the Arion Technologies Group.
I just think having a workplace culture that acknowledges that employees are people with feelings and needs and lives is also really important. I think gone are the days where you live to work. We should be focusing on working to live. I'm not a work relations expert, but it's something I do have a keen interest in and would like to learn more about. But I do think that as pharmacists, we can provide the best level of care to our patients if we take the best level of care with ourselves. I think that we need to be more equipped to deal with conflict. I don't think it's something that's really taught much at an undergraduate level, and I think a lot of graduates are shoved into positions of leadership really quickly. I remember being registered for 6 months and being de facto manager of a pharmacy in the city, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So I think putting some of that into either workplace training or internship programs, just some really good conflict resolution, leadership skills, management skills. It can be really hard, especially if you're like a 22-year-old who's never had a full-time job before. It's a lot to ask.
Welcome to today's episode of the Pharmacy View podcast. I am super excited to be here today with Maria Cooper. I am going to leave it to Maria to introduce herself and tell us a bit about her pharmacy story, but I do want to start by saying why I invited Maria here. Maria is doing some really interesting research around early career pharmacists and stress levels, job satisfaction, and also the value of peer support as well. So, without further ado, welcome, Maria. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I know we've had a few hurdles trying to get here, but I'm really glad that we can finally be here today. You've done a really good job of introducing me and my research, but of course I will have a little go at introducing myself too. So I'm a Ph.D. student at the University of South Australia in Adelaide. I'm also a part-time community pharmacist. So I've been working in community pharmacy, first of all, as an assistant when I was in my undergraduate degree, and I did my internship in 2015. So I'm coming towards the end of that early career pharmacy period. Funnily enough, entering into almost like a mentoring role with some young pharmacists and some interns as well. But doing this research, I just really am passionate about it because I think with the COVID-19 pandemic especially, I've seen so many young pharmacists and assistants and really bright young people just struggling and not getting the level of support that they need. And I'm thinking, well, if I'm struggling, can you imagine what these young professionals are feeling entering a new profession, getting out of uni and really entering that adult world for the first time and going, oh my gosh, we're in a pandemic. This is not what I hoped for or planned entering in this profession. Yeah, I'm going to keep rambling unless you ask me a question.
No, I'm really fascinated by what you were saying and how it kind of ended up to, I guess where you are in the research sector there. And it's also interesting that you do have that still hands-on frontline experience of part-time in community pharmacy as
Yeah.
well. So just setting the scene, you said that you're coming to the end of that early career phase. For those of us who don't know, is there a specific time frame that we justify or we qualify as early career pharmacists?
Yes, so in Australia, the general terminology is that once you've been a pharmacist for 10 years, that means you're no longer an early career pharmacist and your class is being a mid-career pharmacist. So you'll be a lot more established in your career at that point. I know other countries do have different guidelines. Last year I went to the FIP World Pharmacy Congress, which was in Brisbane, Australia, and they had some different guidelines depending on what country. So a lot of the international guidelines said maybe 7 or 8 years as well. And I know sometimes when you register for conferences and stuff, they'll say early career is like 2-3 years. So I think generally we say up to 10 years here. So I think I'm entering my 9th year as a registered pharmacist. So definitely coming up to the end of that, but I've still got a lot to learn.
Yeah, as we all do, I think, irrespective of how long we've been in pharmacy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned around COVID-19 and the stress and that pharmacists came out of uni and they're early in their career and like, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
When did you start your research and how did it come about?
Okay, well, the way that I got into my research was a very serendipitous series of events, to be honest. I think that I was kind of getting to a point around 6-7 years in my career, like 2018, 2019. I was feeling a little bit like I wasn't really utilizing my skills as a clinician, and I felt that my knowledge in pharmacology and medicine was kind of slipping a little bit. As much as community pharmacy is really great because you do get to build these wonderful relationships with people, I did find that a lot of my knowledge was being used in more of a business sense and a retail sort of sense, and it wasn't really what I had in mind for myself as a pharmacist, because I say to a lot of people, if I wanted to own a business, I would have done a commerce degree. I know there are a lot of people who do want to own a pharmacy business and all power to them, but it was just not for me.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I decided to do a Master's of Clinical Pharmacy at University of Queensland. And I didn't know that there was going to be a pandemic, so I signed up for that in December 2019. But to be honest, it really was quite good to be doing it at that time. Like, as tiring as it was to work full-time in suburban community pharmacy and do that external degree there, I felt really fulfilled in terms of getting my clinical knowledge refreshed. I felt up to date on a lot of what was happening in the pharmacy sphere so I could help my colleagues and my patients. And it was also just really good to be able to debrief once a week with some other pharmacists while we're doing our little group assignments. And we could just get together and talk about how we were feeling and what was going on, both within pharmacy and outside of pharmacy. And it was just nice to feel like a part of something. And I think that is also very reflective in the peer support research that I'm doing. But anyway, how I got into my peer support thing was I made one friend in my master's degree. Shout out to Rachel McCosker, lovely lady. I made one friend. And so what happened was that she just had a baby and she was moving from one town to another, and she was looking for a new pharmacy job on Seek, and she found this project. UniSA had actually put the project up on Seek so that you could apply from anywhere and be like, I want to do this project. And she just sent it to me and she goes, Maria, this is your project. You need to apply. And I was like, sure, okay. Because it said on there too, we're looking for an experienced community pharmacist. And I'm going, I've only been a pharmacist for like 7 years, but apparently that's experienced enough. So I applied. I had also applied for the pharmacy candidate pool at SA Health at the same time, and I was just kind of waiting to see which one I got offered first. And I got offered the PhD first. I had a really wonderful interview with my primary supervisor and some of the other people on my supervisory team. Went really, really well. And yeah, so then I started the PhD in May 2022.
Amazing. It does sound serendipitous,
It really
especially
was.
especially with the start of COVID and then,
Yeah.
one friend and moving on. So
Yeah.
so when you started the PhD, what were they looking for? What explain to me what the project aim was.
Okay. Well, I think the project aim, well, I think kind of coming out of that 2021 sort of area, because I mean, the ad came out late 21, early 2022. I think generally we're dealing with a bit of a shortage in terms of the community pharmacy area. I
Yep.
don't know if this is still the case now, and but really, like when I was in undergrad, like 10 years ago, unfortunately, there was this sort of stigma towards community pharmacy. I don't know if you felt that same way when you were in uni. It was always this kind of vibe that, oh, the best students got hospital placements and the best students got hospital internships. And if you were a community pharmacist, then you weren't as good or as smart. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to have, especially because there are people who come into this career and they love community pharmacy and they love that aspect of getting, being able to be the support system for a small community and having those wonderful relationships and having to be a jack of all trades in terms of the different areas of healthcare, and to be told by your peers that you're not as valuable or as intelligent, it can be quite harmful. I also think that, though, with the bushfires or the floods that we've had and the COVID-19 pandemic, community pharmacists are one of the only professionals, if not the only professional, that didn't have the luxury of translating most of their services to a virtual sort of basis. So, unfortunately, when a lot of places were locked down and people were restricted in terms of the places they could go to, people would go to the community pharmacy, and because they weren't able to have their normal sort of outlets to deal with their emotions and their feelings, so like no gyms, no cafes, no social groups and those sorts of things. The pharmacist might be one of the only people they see in the day, and then they become the brunt of these unresolved feelings and stress, and which is already adding a lot of stress to a hard day in the pharmacy with a lot of shortages and things like that. So I think with our research, we want to just see, what do these young pharmacists need to feel comfortable and safe and fulfilled in their careers, so that they will want to pursue the career as a long-term sort of thing. I think I was looking at some data from APRA, and I think in pharmacy, the average age of Australian pharmacists is about 36, 37 years of age. So we're a relatively young profession. There are a lot more younger people in the profession than there are older people, because it really kind of bunches up in that mid-30s, but then it tapers off quite a bit, because you do have some really passionate pharmacists who are still practicing into their 70s and 80s, and we love that. But there is sort of a drop-off after the late 30s. And I don't know if that's because we're increasing the number of class sizes and the number of students that come through, but or are we just having a lot of pharmacists leave the industry after 10 years?
Yeah, and look, it is a challenging question that I think is being looked at from various angles.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you say about the almost stigma that was around 10 years ago, that the hospital versus community pharmacy, and it is something that we've spoken about. I've personally spoken about with a mutual colleague, Carly Johnston, around the
Legend.
yes, the us and them mentality, the hospital versus community. And she said, we are all pharmacists
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, and we need to be looking at tools and upskilling and support
Yes.
across the board.
Yeah.
So, in your research around, community pharmacy, early career community pharmacists,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you've been looking at what they need to be supported, what they need to feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
in their careers.
Mm.
What's some of the things that you're finding so far?
All right. Well, I have completed one round of survey data. So when did I do it? Probably about 8 months ago or so. I did
Yeah.
some um, recruitment for a survey, and I had over 400 people respond, which was amazing. We did kind of find from that pharmacists, the community pharmacists that responded, generally do enjoy being community pharmacists. I found that with the job satisfaction data we got, there was a really good satisfaction in terms of the relationships they had with their colleagues and their supervisors. So there was a good sense of community and good bonding within a workplace. There was also some data that suggested, pharmacists love being able to help people and having that sense of community. And it is a really rewarding and fulfilling job in that aspect. However, it really came to be apparent that it's more about the level of recognition and acknowledgement and thanks. First of all, I mean, remuneration is a really big one in terms of, pharmacists doing so many services for free. And because these services are done for free, they're kind of being taken for granted. Okay. And then I think just being acknowledged as a competent health professional. So I got this even from family members when I was starting out in pharmacy. Oh, what do you want to be a pharmacist for? Don't you just stick a label on a box? We've all been told that. We all have. But I think because pharmacy is such a mysterious profession, not many people actually know what it is that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be hard to explain sometimes because a lot of the stuff that we have to do, we have to hide because it's got sensitive patient information and we can't make it really obvious as to this is what we're doing, this is why your script is taking so long, blah, blah, blah. I actually had a really lovely patient encounter probably a few months ago, and it was a really quiet day on a Sunday afternoon, and this young person comes in and they go, hey, they hoped my colleague was in instead of me because I was just filling in. But they wanted to say a really big thank you to my colleague for helping them out so much, reminding them to get their ADHD medication on time.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I was just in the area, and I really wanted to say thanks to this lady here. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll pass it on. She's not here today, but I really appreciate that. I mean, we really love being appreciated for what we do. And then this person very sheepishly was like, I'm so sorry if this comes off, some kind of way. But what is it that you do? And no, they were really lovely about it. And because I had the time, I was able to explain, this is what we do, we have to. And they go, what do you learn in university? And I was telling them again, like we do physiology, we do pharmacology, toxicology, statistics, organic chemistry, all of these sorts of things. And then the pharmacy specific subjects. And they're going, oh my gosh, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, it is really cool. We actually know a lot. We just, unfortunately, can be quite time poor sometimes. And again, because a lot of the stuff we do is really quite sensitive, we can't be out there showing you what we do. So it looks like we're just kind of standing there, but we're very good actors at being calm when things are busy. But yeah, it's a lot more than sticking a label on a box. And I think that the public needs to be a bit more aware of that too.
Yeah, and that's something that has come up time and time again in this particular podcast of people that I've interviewed, is that collectively as a profession, we need to find a way to be better at educating the public to be aware, so that we have the capacity, I guess, to be more recognised and appreciated for what we do. So at the moment, I guess that is something that's somewhat out of our control.
Yeah.
And as someone who works with frontline pharmacists and pharmacy assistants, I'm really big on trying to help people to identify what is in their control and what they can have some influence over to improve, whether it's stress, job satisfaction, or even engagement, career trajectory, lots of different things. So is there anything in your research that you can share with our listeners that is things that are in their control that might be able to improve their quality of time at work?
There has been some research in terms of individual resilience and, developing those really good coping strategies and managing your stress in a positive way rather than turning to negative crutches like, for example, alcohol use and overeating and self-isolation and that kind of thing. But it really has shown that, unfortunately, a lot of organizational changes need to be made, especially in terms of how we value our own mental health and our own physical health. But the pandemic's kind of done that with everyone. Um, in terms of the peer support aspect that we're looking at doing, I think it is really important that we do kind of get these groups of pharmacists to be able to come together and talk in an open, shame-free environment. Because another thing that I really want to talk about is how, with rural and remote pharmacy especially, now I've never worked in that area, but I do see a lot of job ads for them being like, hey, we're looking for a pharmacist to work in the middle of nowhere for the next year. We'd love to take a graduate or a new pharmacist. And I'm going, the money's pretty good, but could you imagine being a new pharmacist 1 or 2 years out of your degree, working in a town where you don't know anybody? You're the only pharmacist for 100 kilometers. And who do you turn to when you're not feeling your best? Can be a very isolating experience. And even if you're in an urban or suburban sort of area, sometimes you can be the only pharmacist in the business. And if you're having, whether it be a mental blank or an ethical dilemma, or you've been abused, who do you turn to? And you just kind of have to really keep that face on for the rest of your shift. And that can be really unhealthy to bottle some of that stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. So unpack for me organizational change and peer support. And I know they're two massive topics, but if we're looking at high level overviews, unpack what you see in terms of what needs to be done in organizational change and or maybe the trends even. And I guess where peer support fits into that too.
All right. So look, organizational changes are big changes, and we're
Yeah.
even finding research saying, we need big legislative changes, and the whole profession of pharmacy needs to be revamped to an extent. But I also think that a lot of workplace cultures in general need to be looked at with a new lens. So again, we can talk about remuneration all we want, but we can't do anything about that.
Yep.
But I just think having a workplace culture that acknowledges that employees are people with feelings and needs and lives is also really important. I think gone are the days where you live to work. We should be focusing on working to live. I'm not a work relations expert, but it's something I do have a keen interest in and would like to learn more about. But I do think that as pharmacists, we can provide the best level of care to our patients if we take the best level of care with ourselves. I think that we need to be more equipped to deal with conflict. I don't think it's something that's really taught much at an undergraduate level, and I think a lot of graduates are shoved into positions of leadership really quickly.
Yep.
I remember being registered for 6 months and being de facto manager of a pharmacy in the city, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So I think putting some of that into either workplace training or internship programs, just some really good conflict resolution, leadership skills, management skills. It can be really hard, especially if you're like a 22-year-old who's never had a full-time job before. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I had a flag or some pom poms, I'd be waving them right now because I 100% agree
Yeah.
with what you're saying there, and I really it obviously it is my business, it's my passion, but
Yes.
but at the same time, there's all of these, I call them one removed skills from being a pharmacist that actually
Yes.
allow us to be effective practitioners, can have that enjoyment and that quality at work, a quality of life at work as well. So I completely agree with you, and I think that's where emotional intelligence training comes in. But that's
Yes.
my rabbit
Yeah.
hole, not yours. So
Yeah.
please continue on. There's some fantastic ideas around organizational change and about empowering people to be aware of their own emotions and aware of how to deal with conflict.
Yeah.
So in terms of peer support, how do you see peer support supporting these changes that you're identifying here?
Well, I think until changes can be made at the top, we need to do the best we can to take care of ourselves as employees, as employee pharmacists at the bottom. So
Yay.
one of one of the things about peer support is that everybody involved in a peer support environment, they all see each other as equals. So there's no judgment, and it's not really about giving advice or mentoring or informing. It's just about feeling seen and being part of a community of people who are just like you. So yeah, peer support is quite different from concept of mentoring or an internship or having a
Yeah.
supervisor. It's one employee pharmacist in a group of other employee pharmacists. They're all in the same sort of boat and they're all dealing with the same kind of problems. They can talk to each other about, what they've done or how they're feeling or how they would go about something, but not in a way that's like, this is what you should do because I'm more intelligent and experienced than you. It's kind of like, I think this because this, what do you think? And just so people can feel less alone and less isolated.
Yeah.
I do think, again, going back to the grand scheme of health professionals, that community pharmacists are very unique. I would say we're only kind of similar to maybe like physiotherapists or psychologists who work in their own sort of isolated business. But it's not like being at a hospital where you have a team of people that you work with every day, or you've got all these different wards, or you can talk to people in other professions quite quickly. I mean, I don't know, but I imagine it would be a bit easier to talk to a doctor or a nurse in the hospital if you work with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and going back to the story of that graduate in the middle of nowhere, it's good to be able to have a little space that you can go to and go, I'm not alone in this. There are people who are going through this just like me.
Yeah. The thing that I'm hearing as you're saying this is like it's about really being seen, validated, and supported, and breaking down silos. And because whether we like it or not, just by the way pharmacies are built, community pharmacies,
Yeah.
we can be quite siloed within our four walls.
Yes.
And though there are means such as social media and whatnot, they may not be always practical or helpful in terms of offering the support that we require in our times of need as
Well,
well.
that being said, like social media and the online presence has really helped a lot with peer support, especially since 2020. So I do some work with a young doctor from Queensland called Dr. Tani Bridson, and she was 2022 Young Queenslander of the Year. She's a really amazing person, and
Yeah.
she's the founder of an online support program called Hand in Hand Peer Support.
Yeah,
So
right.
she put that together following, I think, I don't want to tell her story, but I believe that a mentor close to her, unfortunately, passed, lost their battle with suicide. Basically,
Yeah,
you would say
okay.
that in a gentle way,
Yeah.
but it really highlighted how tough young doctors are doing it, and doctors in general, people in the medical field, and I think having to deal with that idea that doctors and medical personnel can do no wrong, that they have to put their patients before themselves in every other case, and you know they don't matter because their patient matters more than them. And me not being a doctor can't really elaborate on that more, but I imagine in the height of the COVID pandemic, it would have been an extremely tough climate. And so Tani put this group together on Facebook, I believe it started out, and now it's become this massive independent non-profit organisation that helps with the mental well-being of a large range of health professionals as well as medical students as well. And Kay Dunkley, who we all know from the Pharmacy Support Service, she's involved with Hand in Hand as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing.
Cool. So that leads really well into the next question that was bubbling away, which is how do you think, or how would you recommend if someone was wanting to maybe set up a bit of a peer support system maybe they're in a small town that has a few pharmacies, or
Yeah.
maybe they are virtually or remote, or even in a large city. How would you recommend, if there was a few steps, how would you recommend someone go about setting up and being involved in peer support?
Well, peer support is a very old concept it's been done for hundreds of years actually. I think if you look at the literature, you can see these sorts of patterns where people would form groups, and we talk about things like local mums groups and men's sheds, and even things like AA meetings and things like that, where people come together in a group and they're all in a same situation together, and they just need to have a chat about how they're doing. I don't know if you've ever been in a mums group, but that sort of thing. I've seen friends in mums groups, and they're all there with their babies, and they're all talking about their unique experiences as new mums, and they just want to feel part of a community. So small town, if you've got like a local community centre and you want to organise just a catch up for people who fit a certain phase in life, or, you know, hey, let's all the health people in this town come together once a month on a Wednesday or something, and we'll have tea and biscuits and whatever, I don't know. But that's all that you really need, is just a time and a place and your people.
Amazing. And so if you were a person that was going to, say, set up a peer support group, or say, hey, you know, let's get a group of like-minded people together. If you were just to describe the type of mindset to walk into that peer support group with, what would the mindset be that would really foster the growth and the effectiveness and the value of peer support?
All right. Well, I don't know if we're going to get to this later, but if we're going to plug my research, I'm going to be doing something like this quite soon.
Awesome.
Establishing a feasibility study on peer support in early career pharmacists. So after I get this second survey done, I'm going to do that. But anyway, I think if you're entering a peer support meeting, it would be best to go in feeling as open-minded as you can be, as calm as you can be, and just willing to take things in, whether that be taking new friendships, taking new perspectives, and just let yourself be part of a group. I think it's really important to go in feeling open-minded and ready to join an experience, because you're not going to benefit if you're feeling really closed off mentally.
Yeah. So being open and an equal, so like neither above nor below the others in the room. Everyone comes in with their unique story, which is as equally as important as the next person.
Yes, everyone's story is as important.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So you did briefly mention there about your second survey. So tell us, is that still open at the moment?
It is still open. I'd originally planned for it to close a couple of weeks ago, but I think with the Christmas period and things, you know, people were doing their own thing. So I have extended the survey to encompass the APP 2024 conference in the Gold Coast. So if anybody does see me there, I'll have the QR code on my phone at all times. And I will ask quite nicely and persistently for you to take part. But so I do have that survey still going. I've posted it a million times on LinkedIn and on the PSA Early Career Pharmacy Facebook page. You should also see it I've sent it to a couple of banner groups as well. So if you work at one of those banner groups, you might see it. And also with the PDL insurance newsletter as well. So I've been trying really hard.
Yeah. And tell me, what is involved, and just explain to our listeners what this survey is about, and why is it so important that you get this second round of surveys completed?
All right. So I think it's really important to have some longitudinal data. So even if you haven't taken part in the first round, taking part in the second round will just help give readers, the wider population, and also the higher up people in community pharmacy an idea about how the climate of community pharmacy is changing over time. So from the results I got last year, it'd be really good to see if there have been any changes this year. For example, following maybe the introduction of 60-day dispensing, and if that's caused any sort of stress in your area. I know we're not really talking about it as much as we used to, because things are kind of calming down a little bit. But, it's just good to see if there are any changes that are being made in the industry and how they're impacting the way that pharmacists are feeling, if they're feeling secure in their jobs, satisfied with their careers, and that they feel like it's something that they feel fulfilled in and want to continue.
Yeah.
But so the survey, it includes, some information about who you are. It is anonymous. So stuff about who you are, like, are you in the city or do you work in a very remote town? Whether you work alone or with other pharmacists, and whether you work full-time, part-time, that kind of thing. Then just have a few validated questionnaires. So there's a K10 stress scale, the JSS job satisfaction scale, and then also the professional quality of life healthcare measure. And then after that, it's just a couple of short questions about how you manage with stress.
Yeah, great. So sounds relatively quick and painless by the sounds of
It
things.
should take about 15 minutes. It's a
Yep.
lot of little bubble questions, so you don't have to write a big deal. So, yeah, you can just kind of leave it open and do little bubbles as you feel like going along. There are 5 $100 Visa gift cards up for grabs too, so that can always help if you win that. You might be able to get yourself a little something. We like to incentivize, but yeah,
Yeah. Look, and I think that the work and, as you said, longitudinal data is so important, especially if you're going to be moving into the next phase of your research after this,
yes,
around, what those meaningful support groups look like, and,
yeah,
setting them up for community pharmacists as
mm,
well. So I think while we talk about things sorry, let me start again.
you're good.
While we say that there is a lot out of our control when it comes
Mm,
to large, meaningful change,
mm.
yes, large, meaningful change starts with research like yours.
It does. Yes.
And
So,
so while we can't necessarily be the person that changes, we can support this large, meaningful change by
yeah.
supporting the data that's going to drive change in future.
Yeah, I think it's up to us as researchers to put data together so we can present it on a bigger scale, have influential people look at it and go, oh my gosh, this is what our up and coming industry, like this is what our young people and our early career pharmacists is what they need to continue to feel fulfilled and remain in the pharmacy industry. Because we all know we've got an aging population and a lot of people are going to need our care, and we need people to want to remain in this industry and feel
Yeah.
fulfilled in this industry as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of your research as well, because
Thank you so
I,
much.
oh, no, thank you. Because, and this is why I was so excited to have a chat to you, because I
Oh,
think that as pharmacist and as someone who is very big around, leadership of self and others within community pharmacy and
mm,
pharmacy in general, we need to be able to provide the tools to people to be
mm,
able to advocate for themselves and influence their careers and their lives effectively. But we
absolutely.
also need to be guided by data that's relevant to our industry as
Mm,
well. And at the moment, apart from, some smaller studies out of America, and there's a
mm,
few that, Carly's done some stuff in
yes.
Australia, obviously, that there is stuff out there, but a lot more work needs to be done.
I
And,
love, yeah.
this is really important, because there seems to be comparatively a lot of stuff around doctors and not so much about
Yes.
pharmacists.
Yeah.
So
But
it's
that,
great to
yeah.
see that that we're getting specific, and we can still utilize the stuff from
Yeah.
parallel professions, but it is
Mm,
nice to have something of our
yeah.
own as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of research is being done on doctors and nurses because they're commonly conducted in a big hospital area. So they just get all the doctors in that hospital and then do the research. But again, for us in the community, it can be a lot harder to get us all together to join for a cause.
So, Maria, the last question I want to ask you is one that I ask to all of my guests, and that is, I am building the ultimate leaders toolbox,
Mm.
and I want to know if there was one tool that you could put in that you could have every pharmacist or anyone in community pharmacy have to support their careers and their leadership of
Mm.
themselves and others. What would it be?
I think something that we should all have is the ability to find calmness, to kind of be able to take yourself out of a situation and acknowledge the things, again, the things that you can change and the things that you can't change. I think having that sense of calm and groundedness is really important when we're dealing with a conflict or a frightening situation, something that's really difficult, and go, okay, what am I capable of? What am I not capable of doing in this situation? So I think if we don't have that understanding of ourselves and our own skill set, and we're doing things that we're trying to change things that are not changeable, then it's only going to bring a lot more frustration and stress moving forward.
Oh my goodness, I love that one.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
no, what what brilliant advice. The power of perspective, is one that is just incredible, and it really can help to release the pressure valve
Absolutely.
and temper your expectation and also your output as well.
Yeah. Again, this is something I think I've learned from, I guess, supervising interns and young assistants and things, and someone will go off at them for no reason whatsoever, and it really shakes up the young staff member, and then this customer storms off, and I go, I want you to remember that you did everything in your power. You did a very good job. This person's angry at something else in their day, and you just happen to be there. Yeah. You have done nothing wrong. You know, that's not something you could have changed. You can't change the fact that this person's got family trouble going on, or that they're running late for work or whatever. That's not your business. You need to take that and put that over there.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Maria, thank you so much for sharing your research, your passion, why you're going into it, how to set up peer support, and also about your second round of surveys that is coming out at the moment. So please, everyone, any early career pharmacists working in community pharmacy, jump on board, and we will put a link to the questionnaire, the survey.
Thank you so much.
As well. So thank you so much for being here, Maria, and I look forward to keeping our relationship up well into
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was so lovely to have you invite me on this podcast. It's just such a beautiful, pleasant surprise. I do look forward to meeting you at APP.
Me too. Yep. Can't wait to be there.
Amazing. All right, thank you again so much. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast. And don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment if you found this episode of value or have feedback. Podcast episodes are promoted through social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, and major podcast mediums. And each episode can be found on the Pharmacy View webpage with links to guest contact and business details. If you're a pharmacist or industry support supplier who would like to join us on an episode, send us a message through LinkedIn or complete an inquiry form on the Pharmacy View webpage. I am your host, Chantelle Turner, pharmacist, leadership coach, and founder of Turn Pharmacy Leadership. And on behalf of Shopfront Solutions and Arion Technologies, thanks again for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast.